I'm here in Bath Beach, Brooklyn. At one time, Bath Beach and its adjoining neighborhoods of Bensonhurst, Gravesend, and Dyker Heights was the epicenter for Mafia activity in the entire United States, with all 5 of New York's Mafia families being active here. During the 1980s, this region of Brooklyn reached its peak of violence when bloody wars were raging and mob hits were occurring on a regular basis. While Mafia families often include members who are related, the term family is an analogy for an organization. However, there was one actual family of blood relatives whose mob-connected male members all experienced an eerily similar recurring pattern of violent endings, and that family is the Varriales. This is the story about one Brooklyn family whose uncanny legacy of bloodshed spans all the way back to the early 20th century. In the early 1980s, a young hood from Brooklyn named Carmine Varriale was building his mob ties, and by 1986, he was one of the youngest men to ever be made in the Lucchese family at the age of 28. He was an associate of the unhinged Lucchese capo Anthony Gaspipe Casso. Another cohort of Varriales was Frank Santora, who was the cousin of the notorious corrupt police officer Louis Ippolito. Ippolito and his partner Stephen Caracappa were known as the Mafia cops and worked for the Lucchese family, giving them inside information and also carrying out hits on their behalf. Varriale and Santora both frequented Bonanno capo Anthony Spiro's social club in Bath Beach, which once stood right behind me at 1724 Bath Avenue. On the afternoon of September 3, 1987, Varriale and Santora had left Spiro's social club and were walking down Bath Avenue when a gunman approached them from behind and shot them both several times. They were both gunned down right here at 1508 Bath Avenue, where the Bath Avenue dry cleaning and tailoring shop once stood.
September 3rd, 4:20 p.m. Carmine Varali and Frank Santora shot dead on the street.
Each was struck with 3 .38 caliber bullets. The 30-year-old Varriale died on the spot, while the 51-year-old Santora was rushed to the hospital where he later passed away.
I just couldn't believe my eyes seeing the blood on the street.
Santora and Varriale were killed by Lucchese associate Frank Smith Jr., with Lucchese hitman and former DeMeo crew members Anthony Center and Joey Testa, aka the Gemini twins, positioned as backup shooters. It's unclear exactly why the men were murdered. Some believe that it was over a dispute that Carmine Varriale was having with Gaspipe, and thus he ordered them to be killed, while others believe that it was revenge for a murder that Carmine himself was suspected of being involved in 2 months earlier. It's believed that Frank Santora was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time and wasn't an intended target. His cousin Louis Ippolito was said to be enraged by his murder and was demanding answers as to why he was killed. Varriale and Santora's murders were just 2 of many mob-related homicides which occurred during a very violent year in Brooklyn in 1987. Carmine Varriale was the 7th member of the Varriale family to be murdered on the streets of Brooklyn. A little over 2 months before Carmine Varriale was killed, on June 12, 1987, 2 brothers named Vincent and Enrico Karini, who were associated with the Colombo family, were both murdered. 26-year-old Vincent was found dead in the back seat of an Oldsmobile parked on Avenue X in the Sheepshead Bay neighborhood of Brooklyn. He had been shot 9 times in the head and back. In the back seat of another car parked a few feet away, 23-year-old Enrico was found dead with 5 shots to his chest. Some believe that their murders were revenge for the killing of another Varriale family member, while others said it was the result of a bloody war being waged by the Colombo family. Some suspected that Carmine Varriale was involved in the killing of the Karini brothers as a result of what occurred a few months earlier. Carmine Varriale's half-brother, 24-year-old Pasqual Varriale, who was nicknamed Patty Bulldog, was another aspiring mobster with a formidable reputation. He was an associate of the Bonanno family and also hung out at Anthony Spiro's social club on Bath Ave. In the beginning of 1987, someone with the Bonanno family had given Patty $10,000 to give to a juror who was on the jury of the Pizza Connection trial, which was nearing its conclusion. The Pizza Connection was a major heroin smuggling ring where mobsters used pizza parlors as drug fronts up until it was busted in 1984. Numerous mobsters were indicted on drug charges, including several members of the Bonannos, and it wound up being the longest criminal trial in U.S. history to date. However, the juror that Patty approached had gotten cold feet about accepting the bribe and refused the money, so Patty decided to keep the cash for himself. He went to Atlantic City where he gambled away the entire $10,000. Not surprisingly, this flagrant act did not sit well with the Bonannos. On February 14, 1987, Patty Varriale's dead body was found bound and covered in a blanket in front of a church near Coleman Street and Avenue U in the Flatland section of Brooklyn. His killing occurred at a garage on Nostrand Avenue owned by Pete Fransone, which was an infamous slaughterhouse where mobsters fingered by the Mafia cops were sent to be killed. Some believed that Patty's murder was committed by the Karini brothers, which later led his half-brother Carmine to kill them in retaliation. But others said that the half-brothers were not close, and in fact the murder of Patty Varriale was alleged to have been carried out by Frank Santora, the same man who would be killed alongside Carmine 7 months later. Law enforcement, on the other hand, speculated that the Karini brothers' murders came about due to an incident which occurred the month prior to Patty Varriale's killing. Salvatore Scarpa, who was the younger brother of vicious Colombo capo Greg the Grim Reaper Scarpa, was involved in narcotics trafficking for the Colombos. Scarpa's social club was once located in the space right behind me at 1275 74th Street in Dyker Heights. In the late evening on January 14, 1987, 5 gunmen burst into Scarpa's social club and robbed several patrons, then shot Salvatore Scarpa in the head. Scarpa died from his injuries a few hours later. Four of the perpetrators were unmasked and described by witnesses as all being black men, but the lone masked gunman was described as being a white man they believed to be from the neighborhood, possibly a Karini brother. This led law enforcement to believe that the murders of the Karinis 5 months later was really Greg Scarpa avenging his brother's shooting. But it wasn't until years later that it was revealed that the Karini brothers were murdered because of a botched hit. Colombo capo Joel Cacachi, who was acting on orders from imprisoned boss Carmine Persico, gave a contract to the Karinis to murder a former prosecutor named William Aronwald. However, the Karini brothers mistakenly tailed his 78-year-old father George Aronwald instead and shot him dead outside of a laundromat in Queens. After the botched assignment, Cacachi ordered the Karinis killed, and as one account goes, the men he recruited to take them out were none other than Carmine Varriale and Frank Santora. Then it was allegedly Cacachi who ordered Varriale and Santora killed in order to cover his tracks and eliminate all links between him and the Aronwald murder. A few years earlier, there was another Varriale family member who had earned a hostile reputation in Brooklyn. Patty Bulldog's cousin, Albert Varali Jr., nicknamed Albie, was known in Gravesend as a volatile and dangerous character, and of his many misdeeds, he was accused of raping a girl. In July of 1983, Albie Varriale was on 86th Street and 20th Avenue in Bath Beach when a gunman approached him and shot him dead in front of numerous witnesses. He was allegedly killed by a man named Kevin Granado, who was with the Colombo family and part of Greg Scarpa's crew. The reason for Albie's murder is still unclear, but there were rumors that it was due to him making it known around town that he was seeking revenge for an incident that took place 1 year earlier. Albie Varriale had a brother who was also named Pasqual and known as Pat. Like his brother, Pat had the reputation of being a brazen thug, and the duo of Pat and Albie was notorious on the streets of Gravesend. Pat was known to go to high schools and rob students of their jewelry. The two seemed to cause drama everywhere they went, and they rode around the streets on dirt bikes, oftentimes leading cops on chases. On May 7, 1982, Pat was released from jail after serving 2 months for robbery, and shortly afterwards he was wanted for a string of other robberies. A few weeks later, on May 27, 1982, 18-year-old Pat Variale was walking here along West 7th Street in Gravesend when 2 men pulled up in a vehicle, hopped out, and shot him 4 times in the chest before he could pull his own gun. He was killed on the spot right here in front of 1601 West 7th Street. The exact reason for his murder is undetermined, but it's alleged that he robbed a kid who was the son of a wise guy and may have also been robbing places owned by mobsters and was killed in retaliation. Some say that the behavior of brothers Pat and Albie was due to what they witnessed as kids 8 years earlier. Albert Varriale Sr. was Pat and Albie's father and uncle to Carmine Varriale. He was a small-time mobster in Gravesend who had been arrested 6 times for charges ranging from grand larceny to rape and had served time in prison. He was involved in different criminal activities like loan sharking. On the morning of April 3, 1975, Albert was sitting in a Cadillac by Kings Highway and Quinton Road near his home in Gravesend when an assailant ran up to his vehicle and blasted him to death with a shotgun. It was said that his sons Pat and Albie witnessed his shooting and were traumatized and angered by his murder. Neighborhood lore says that their father's murder motivated the brothers to take on a sort of vigilante role against wise guys, and thus targeted mobsters or their children for robberies and assaults. Whether this was the actual motivation behind their activities or not, crossing the wrong people seems to be what ultimately led to both of their demises. Now we go back several decades to the year 1936 in Coney Island. Albert Varriale Sr.'s cousin was Fortunato Varali, another small-time mobster who associated with various mafia figures in the area. Just before midnight on December 31st, 1935, 23-year-old Fortunato was speaking with his brother in front of a home on West 16th Street when a gunman appeared from the shadows and began firing, striking him twice in the abdomen, then jumped in a car and sped away. Fortunato died a short time later and had the unenviable distinction of being New York City's first underworld-related murder recorded in 1936. About a decade earlier, we have the tale of yet another man named Pasqual Varriale, who was Fortunato's uncle and Albert Sr.'s father. Known as Patsy, he was born in New York City in 1905, and by the age of 14 he was committing burglaries and other crimes. In 1922, Patsy took a trip to Naples, Italy to join some family, and there he got married and had a daughter. On December 12, 1924, Patsy Varriale and his brother Andrea, who was known as Andrew and was the father to Fortunato Varriale, had gotten into a traffic dispute with a man named Guglielmo Valdescado. Andrew pulled out a knife, but before he could use it, Patsy drew his gun and shot Valdescado several times, badly wounding him, and he died from his wounds in the hospital a few days later. After the shooting of Valdescado, both Patsy and Andrew fled back to the United States to avoid prosecution. Patsy settled in Virginia for some time where he operated a peanut farm, but soon he returned to Brooklyn and wasted no time getting back to his criminal activities. Patsy was committing robberies with over 10 other accomplices until the ring was busted. In 1929, at the age of 24, he was sentenced to 7.5 to 15 years at Sing Sing prison for his involvement in over 20 robberies. In 1935, Patsy was released from Sing Sing, but he and his brother now had to answer for the murder in Italy from 11 years earlier. Patsy insisted that he was the one responsible for the killing and not his brother Andrew. Patsy returned to Italy to face trial for the murder and was convicted and sentenced to a prison term in Naples. He was freed after serving only 16 months and returned to the US, where he settled back in Virginia and had more children, including Albert Sr. and 2 other sons named Carmine and Fortunato. Patsy eventually returned to New York and lived in Brooklyn with his family, where he continued his criminal ways. In 1941, he was arrested for attempted robbery and sentenced to a prison term at Sing Sing. Now we go back to the year 1918 in Coney Island. Patsy and Andrew's 60-year-old father, who was also named Fortunato Varriale, was entangled in an ongoing bloody dispute involving the rental of farmland to a man named Giro Alfano. On July 15, 1918, Alfano's wife Marie was walking down Stillwell Avenue in Coney Island when Fortunato shot her 3 times, badly wounding her, but she survived. Her shooting was revenge for what took place 1 year earlier. Fortunato Varriale was seeking to collect $150 in rent for farmland in Coney Island that he rented out to Giro Alfano. On July 17, 1917, Fortunato's 22-year-old son, yet another man named Carmine, had gone to Alfano's home to collect the debt. When Carmine confronted him, Alfano pulled out a shotgun and blasted him in the chest, killing him instantly. Alfano was charged with first-degree murder, and his wife Marie was also charged as an accomplice. He entered a plea of self-defense, claiming that Varriale had pulled a revolver on him first. After a witness backed up Alfano's statement, he and his wife were acquitted of the charges. The killing of 22-year-old Carmine Varriale in 1917 would be the first of a long list of murder victims, which would be a recurring theme for the next 70 years, until his 28-year-old great-nephew, also named Carmine Varriale, would be murdered in 1987. Many of us will never know about the distant relatives who had comparable personality traits or followed similar career paths as ourselves. But for the men in the Varriale family, their involvement in criminal activities and meeting violent ends happened to be documented through several generations. For 7 decades, the Varriales were on both the giving and receiving end of violence, which resulted in 7 family members being shot dead on the streets of Brooklyn. Determining which Albert, Carmine, or Pasqual was murdered has probably confused you as much as to the reasons why they were killed. Nature versus nurture is a never-ending debate, but it appears to be a mixture of both for the Varriales. Perhaps they had a genetic predisposition to violence, or to lacking the foresight to predict the repercussions of their actions, but given their known criminal associations, it's no surprise how that flammable combination culminated across several generations.